Tuesday, April 16th, Board of Fair Commissioners meeting. And as we do every meeting, we start with a legal notice. As information for our audience, if you're not satisfied with the decision made by the Metropolitan Board of Fair Commissioners today, you may appeal the decision by petitioning for a writ of cert with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of entry of the board's decision. To ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been met, please be advised that you should contact your own independent legal counsel. The meeting is called to order. I know one commissioner will be absent. Another one is stuck in some traffic, but we do have a quorum, so we can proceed with some housekeeping. Including review of the minutes from the previous meeting, which was March 12th. These were circulated. Can't hear? Hello? Okay. Minutes from March 12th have been circulated. Looking for approval or motion to approve. Do we have any discussion on the minutes from last month? All in favor for approval? Aye. Opposed? Let me give you this too. All right, those minutes are approved. Waiting for one commissioner, but we can move on to public comment time. We have a podium here with a microphone as well. If anybody would like to speak, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Identify yourself, please, and your address. Do we have anybody who would like to speak during public comment time?
Good morning. My name is Shane Smiley, Brush Hill Road, Nashville. Over the course of the last year and a half, we've heard a lot from the MLS folks about how they respect the uses of the fairgrounds and how they want to work with us and be a part of this family. But the recent media came out saying that they actually plan to encroach on the entrance of the Speedway, taking 3/5 of that main entryway away, downsizing the ability and squeezing out more of the Speedway's ability to perform properly. So I'm really hoping we hear something from the board concerning that this morning, because this is something that was never discussed in any of the meetings. In a year and a half of meetings, there was never anything said that they were going to downsize that entryway and block us out. So I think there are a lot of people that are gravely concerned about that. We're also hearing a lot lately about quality of life. Colby Sledge has gotten up in the media lately and talked about the quality of life, but nobody's discussing what our 8 races at the Speedway are going to do versus what 34 soccer games are going to do. And those crowds and the late cheers. I mean, what's going to happen on a soccer game when they have a lightning delay on a 6 o'clock game? Is it going to be 11? Is it going to be 12 o'clock when that game finishes? There are no parameters and there are no scheduling. At least the Speedway, you've got the ability to basically schedule when things are going to take place. ESPN will rule the roost on when games are going to be scheduled. They're going to schedule the timing. So everything we have for parameters for the Speedway and to keep the noise, and Colby's talked about the effect on the neighborhood from the traffic for Speedway events. He's talked about light pollution, but that doesn't seem to be a concern when it comes to the soccer side of things. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, is if we're talking quality of life, well, let's be looking at quality of life on all spectrums and not just focusing on the Speedway. The Speedway is mandated to be here by charter, by referendum. So I'm hoping the board will take action and deal with the MLS folks to put that building, if it's going to stay in that position, that it needs to come 15 feet this direction and give the Speedway at least what it currently has for an entryway and not squeezing us out and boxing us out. There are much more ways that they could be inclusive if they really wanted to be a part of the community here. Putting a parking garage, there's a lot of safety concerns with the parking garage within that portion of it as well. In this day and age, we need to be looking at that as a safety concern for the facility as a whole, and I hope you'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Morning.
Morning. My name's Daniel Barron. Can you hear me?
Speak up if you don't mind.
All right, can you hear me? All right. My name's Daniel Barron, Turner Street. I'm responding to this last week and a half or so of comments. We've heard that from Colby Sledge in particular that the public, the community, the immediate community has been included in this inclusive process. That is not the case. Colby tends to speak of Wedgwood Houston as if it's solely representative of District 17, and I can guarantee, I can absolutely assure you that the Vine Hill community has been excluded from these communications. This plan that exists has not been a product of the immediate residents of District 17. It's utter fabrication that this has at all been inclusive. The other thing I'd like you to address is I realize that the conversation later today, or later in this meeting, will focus on the speedway issues. But before we get lost in that conversation, can you please address why you're able to lease 10 acres of the fairgrounds property to become a mixed-use development when this directly contradicts the 1923 Act, Chapter 515? You're, in sections 8 and 10, you're restricted from leasing the property for anything other than educational or amusement purposes. A mixed-use development, 900 apartments, an office tower, hotel, a shopping center. This is neither amusement nor education. And the lease, any type of lease that even fits within those parameters cannot interfere with a fair. That's the whole reason this board exists, is to conduct a fair. And as we know from the March 15th meeting of the TSFC, the Tennessee State Fair Commissioners, they have already voted to leave the site because they can't conduct a fair. So please address this. I look forward to the answer. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment time? Okay, if not, we will move on to monthly reports, and we will start Felicia Bowman with our financial report.
Good morning.
Morning.
Financials for the period ending March 31st, 2019. Revenue, $2,202,162. Expenses, $2,427,762. For a net loss for the month of March, $225,597. Depreciation through the month of March, $278,964. A breakdown of our expenses. Payroll continues to be our biggest expense of $1,019,006. Utilities, $563,788. Purchase services, $167,770. Supplies, $90,330. Communication, $22,171. Temporary services, $133,912. Security services, $77,645. IT services, $102,624. Insurance permits and low cap, $250,516, which brings us to the total of $2,427,762. The breakdown is as follows. In the expenditure category, of course, as I mentioned, payroll, 44% of the expenses are payroll, 21% utilities, 6% purchase services, 4% supplies, 1% communications, 4% temporary services, 3% security services, 4% IT services, and 13% insurance permits. The breakdown of revenue, 41% of the revenue comes from flea market, 15% from parking, 9% from the track, 17% building rent, 1% outside space, 6% concessions, another 6% for state fair, 4% for rentals, and 1% for others. Any questions on revenue and expenses through March? As we mentioned at the last meeting, the budget has been submitted to finance. It has not been approved yet. Laura and I did go before the mayor to present our budget. That went very well. So we're still working on getting that budget approved, and no changes have been made, and the budget was sent out to the Board of Commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from the board? Thank you, Felicia. Okay, Executive Director's report.
Okay, I just have a few items. Did want to announce that Commissioner Hemmer appeared before the Rules Committee 2 weeks ago at the beginning of April, was confirmed, reappointed, and confirmed unanimously by Council. So we want to welcome again Commissioner Hemmer and thank him for continued service to the board.
Thank you, Kayla.
Just a brief mention about Google Fiber. If you recall, back in, I think it was 2014, is that right, Christy? There was an installation of Google Fiber lines that ran through the property that came in and around Wedgwood and went pretty much diagonal through, at the time, Walsh Road, where the expo facilities are. Needless to say, with the construction of the new facilities, we've had to work extensively with Google Fiber to come up with a plan to do a couple things. One, to temporarily relocate the lines periodically throughout the project so that we don't interrupt service, because there is service connected to those lines, and then come up with a plan for permanent relocation, probably through the infrastructure project. Once that's complete, it seems like a logical place to permanently relocate. So we have worked with our partners here at Gobble Hayes, thank Michelle and Ron for their work, and then Metro Legal to get an agreement, an MOU essentially agreed upon, is how that transition of moving those lines was going to occur. So one of the things that was insisted upon was that we will develop a formal easement with Google Fiber once that permanent line is installed, and that's something that we don't have currently. So that will be the end result of this project with Google Fiber.
Just surprised there's actually service from how slow they've been to get set up throughout the city.
Last board meeting, there was some discussion about the fact that we have pushed forward with the food and beverage contract. In your packets, just for your information, is a term sheet. There weren't a lot of changes. I want to thank Randy and his team for their patience and diligence as we work through the RFP process. And of course, our representatives here from procurement as we work through that. Just really briefly, there will be some updates to the contract that will have to occur once we relocate. The premises that's defined in the contract and in the scope of services was our current facilities, because needless to say, we hadn't completed the expo yet. So we will have to update it later this fall when we do the relocation. Compensation is a bit different than what the original contract, the last contract, which was a 5-year term, was a tiered compensation system. So it started at 27% and then advanced as more revenue was made. So it was 27, 32, and then 37%. The compensation structure that we've agreed to is 2% flat across the board all year, and then another 2% which will be put into a fund that will assist us and enhance our marketing and advertising budget, as well as maintenance that may occur at the new site in the kitchen. It's something that we will work together on, and I appreciate their consideration for the marketing fund, as we know that our budget isn't as large as we'd like it to be, and it serves not just the fairgrounds, but our food and beverage team as well, to increase marketing here and get more events into the fairgrounds. They have agreed to a capital investment of $25,000 over the 5-year term, and if I'm correct in saying that they will probably be more of an upfront payment to help us get started and underway in the new facilities. So again, I want to thank them for that. We've adjusted some space that we certainly will provide office space for the general manager who is assigned to the fairgrounds, and any other additional space will be leased separately through the fairgrounds. We'd made a little tweak to our flea market vendors and wanted to make an accommodation for our vendors who sell prepackaged food items. So we just felt that there was a difference between vendors who are selling food that is designed to take with them, the guests to take with them, versus a concession item. A concession item obviously would directly compete against our own concession food and beverage service. So we worked in that we will reserve the right to allow prepackaged food to be sold. We also outlined corkage fees. This is a new term from the last contract, but it was a term that was missing, and it caused us a lot of challenges, especially toward the end of the contract, that we had to come up with a consideration of if someone insisted on bringing in their own food and beverage. Obviously, a big part of our revenue is commission on concessions, and so this helped us with still retaining revenue for the fairgrounds if somebody did decide to bring in. And it also deals with food, catering, and beverages. We also specified sampling sizes, and right now D&D is undergoing a POS update and change. So one of the things that we're going to get from them on a weekly basis is a per event sales report. That's going to be very helpful for our sales team to be able to consider commission on food and beverage as to how successful an event is, along with other factors like rent, attendance, ticket sales, parking revenue, et cetera. We can have a better picture of what each individual event brings in on a revenue standpoint. So that term sheet is in your packet. Happy to answer any questions. And I also want to thank Commissioner McAnally for helping with the contract and RFP.
Thank you. Does that conclude your
Yes.
initial report? Anybody questions on those items? If not, we will move on to Fairgrounds Improvement Project update, please. Morning, Ed.
Good morning, board. How are you doing this morning? Can everyone hear me okay?
Doing fine.
Laura, I hope you're recovering all right this morning. I knocked over your coffee, so hopefully I didn't set you a little too far behind. I'm gonna start this morning the fairgrounds, the project improvement update with a review of the budget. You all should have in front of you the typical dashboard sheet that I present every month. I'm gonna walk down through it, give some updates, basically section by section, just orienting everyone. The top of the page, of course, represents the sources of funding, and then of course the uses are below that. If you look in the uses section, we'll start and work our way down with construction. Again, I always like to highlight that what you're seeing is about 30 to 45 days behind what's actually out on site. And so right now, if you're looking at the line item for construction, it's saying that we're just shy of 30% of our construction budget. Well, in actuality, based on the end of the month of March, as well as where we are in April, actually about 35 to 40%, probably a little closer to 40% at this time. So I always like to highlight that as we're presenting this, just making sure that everyone's aware this is in arrears. Design, as you see, is tracking well. We've entered the construction administration phase of the project, so our funding for that is doing very well. Our design team has been very active out on site. Of course, there's a lot of more trades now, a lot more people out on site, a lot more work progressing in a lot of different areas, so they've become more active in their construction administration. The next section that you'll see is FF&E. That's remained unchanged from the last time that I presented to you all, but that is because there's no financial activity for FF&E. I want to be clear that there is plenty of coordination activity to make sure that we have this building prepared when it opens. So there's a lot of kitchen equipment as well as office and maintenance and operations equipment that's been planned out. And when those dollars start to actually move, when those purchases are made, they'll start to be reflected in that line item. But to date, there has been none. Project management and related expenses are on pace with our projections. They're aligning fairly closely with where we are in the overall project. So we're about 35% there in that section. Overall project's about 31%. So we're keeping pretty tight to our projections there. So happy to report that. Once we go below the expo section, there's been no activity, financial activity related to demolition. So that 1.8 million that's sitting there has not moved since the last report. We also have had little activity related to the fairgrounds allocation for Fair Park, and that's because we're still expending near the very end of this, but still expending parks funding as well as some Metro Water Services funding. So that line item has only moved minimally since I presented that last month. That will definitely begin to shift here as we start to catch up on the final payments for the Fair Park as well as the retainage releases. And so as I've mentioned beforehand, the dollars for the fairgrounds are somewhat the last out the door. And so essentially Laura has the keys to the retainage that'll be released for that project. The final section that excuse me, I skipped one. The grandstands, there's been no activity or movement. As we reported previously, no dollars are being expended from this team related to that unless they're authorized by Laura, and there has not been any invoices that have been paid since we last met.
I do want to add, though, that we are currently upgrading. It is an expense that will hit this line, and that is we had a significant number of lights that were out, and so we did have a plan to update some of the infield and track lighting because they're obsolete. We talked about this before last racing season. The lighting is very old, so not only are the bulbs obsolete, the fixtures are obsolete, and which caused us to go ahead and transition to LED, which was kind of the plan with the Formosas all along, was to go ahead and have a more high-efficient bulb and a better bulb for the track. So we are currently transitioning about 40 lights from what they are now to LED. So that project's underway right now.
As Laura mentioned, and as I mentioned previously, we're presenting in arrears. So when those expenses are paid, they'll be presented. They will hit that line item. The last section, and one I want to talk about just a little bit, on your page, just labeled repairs, demo, and site master planning. That line item has been stagnant for the past few months. We've completed that section of the project, but as you see, there's still $8,122 left in that line item. When we present this to you next month, that'll be zeroed out. The majority of all of those funds are basically captured right now in a contract with Skanska, and so we've been holding that because it aligns with their contract. So we're just going to get those credits just to remove that. So it'll just be an accounting correction so that it's zeroed out because we're not going to tap those dollars.
So for just point of clarification, so for the voting building, if that was to be demoed or when that is demoed, is it going to be coming out of the Fair Park?
Fair Park, correct.
Demo line? Okay.
Correct. That's a good clarification to make, Caleb. Yes, sir.
Are there any other major items in Fair Park that beyond that?
There's the items that are remaining are primarily related to events that took place weather events that took place. And so there are some design adjustments that are being made primarily to the bridge access areas. So those areas are currently asphalted, and they actually delaminated. So water got between subsurfaces there and it lifted the asphalt. And so now we're looking at a design remedy for that because we believe that it may continue to happen. It likely end up being completely concrete to avoid that. And then some replantings and different things like that, but primarily related to that weather event. And then as Caleb mentioned, the voters building or the elections building and what we're calling kind of the island area over there. That entire area's scope is still captured in the Fair Park, and so the timeline for that has been pushed back some, but there are dollars that are held there for those costs. All that being said, that brings our total spent to date to $13,151,230, bringing us all funds included to about just over 30% complete for the project, for the collective projects.
Any questions, anybody? All right, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing? Good. Got just a few slides here just to show some of the progress on site. I apologize for this being washed out here. It may be, it's very green, so I think the green is washing out, which is good. It's good to see the green. Hopefully the others won't. We can always adjust the lights. That may help. Just want to give a quick overview of what's going on there on the site, and pictures really do justice. Let's see here. Okay, thank you, Laura. I appreciate that. Okay, sure thing. Again, this is washed out. I'm very sorry about that. I apologize for that. This is the early April photo of Fair Park. We've got the ribbon cutting later this morning. But as you see, the grass is greening. I'm sorry again for the washout there, but the dog park is open. I'm not sure if anybody's been there, but just about every time I drive by, there are dogs really enjoying it. So I think that they're very appreciative of that space there. And Ed talked about a few last items that are happening there, just to completing on the site, especially the asphalt along the bridge. But it's looking really good, and this is really just from the last couple weeks photo. All right, thank you. So you guys remember the tour you took way back when in March? Seemed like eons ago. That was just 4 weeks ago, and you'll have a chance to see kind of the progress that's happening since then. I mean, this building is massive, and it's happening quickly, and I think the speed of the project is something that's really impressive, and the design and construction team definitely should get a lot of kudos for that because they're working really hard to make this happen. But you guys had a wonderful tour. I think the weather was a little cloudy, but you could kind of get a sense of the slab, so you see how massive the plans are. Laura, you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So Expo 3 is the one that is along the Wedgwood side, and it is close to closed in. We're waiting for the roll-up doors, which will be coming, the overhead doors, in May. And so once those are in, that should close everything in. It's a massive building, so if you know, maybe in another couple of months, it'd be nice to do another tour just for comparison's sake. But that one is getting close to close in. The roof is in, the walls are in, and they're actually working on the interior of the space. The restroom is you know, moving right along, the restroom structure inside. And again, like I said, up next, the overhead doors, you're going to see those go in along Expo 3 first, and then that one will close in, and they'll complete the interiors. Laura, you can move to the next one. Thank you. Oh, that was 2. Yeah. Expo 1, the structure is up. It's actually being roofed in now. It should be complete, I believe, this week. Expo 1, yeah, the roof should be completing the roof part on Expo 1 this week, and then you'll start to see the walls go in as well. That's the largest building. That's the one that is on the north side of the 3 U-shaped buildings. And so, again, you can just see the mass of the space. I mean, it's a very large space. So that's going in. Once they get that the roofed in, they'll work on the walls next there. Expo 2. I don't know that I have a picture of Expo 2, but that's the center building, and the structure is going up on that as well. So you're going to really start to see in the next couple weeks this building completely take shape and them starting to move inside. Shed 1, the concrete pour, I believe, was last night. Good. Okay. Yes. I didn't get a chance to drive by, but the Shed 1 concrete pour, so the floor slab was put in last night, and then they're doing the plumbing, the subgrade plumbing for Shed 2. The show arena, which is the larger building right on the west side of Expo 1, is they're working on the foundation, so they're going to continue the shed space now. There's still excavation going on site. You'll see haul off happening. We're kind of at the tail end of that, but that's still happening. In the next couple weeks, you'll also see some activity along the retaining wall right there on the west. So building enclosure, retaining wall, excavation, those are kind of the big things that you're going to see happening over the next few weeks. Like I said, it's a large building. It's happening quickly. So we really appreciate the team that's working very hard to make it happen. So do you have any questions about the progress of construction? Okay. All right.
Yeah, as Michelle said, we've come a long way in 5 months. We think we're still good. We still had the rainiest February on record, and we're dealing with some of the after effects of that. The buildings are really proceeding quite nicely, and we expect a summer opening or summer availability for some of those. The exterior work is going to be late summer, but we're moving along. I do want to emphasize and go to the next item. The infrastructure project is currently out for designer selection. The designers will go to the Sports Authority meeting in May. If you recall, that project is coming through the Sports Authority for their approval. Hopefully, we'll be able to start construction on the infrastructure in the fall. The MLS, the design work is in detail right now. We're working, or the designers, the architects are working with the teams, administrative and operative staff. They have a new vice president of operations who's bringing a lot of experience to it, and they're into the how does things flow in and out of the kitchen phase. So they're into that kind of level of trying to work out the designs of the MLS structure, and again, it's proceeding nicely. So, any questions on any of these?
A question of clarification of something I've heard in public comment. So I'm going off the assumption that any building design from the mixed-use area is going to be, in terms of relation to the racetrack, is going to have to pass some type of planning or codes so that it'll have the correct amount of, space between the buildings for fire codes, et cetera?
Absolutely. I mean, you got code requirements, and it's also SP zoning, which means the planning reviews every aspect of it. So but the codes are very specific about what you can do and how you do it, and they'll have to meet all those codes.
Thank you.
The issue that has been in the paper and was mentioned earlier about the encroachment on the entrance of the Speedway, have you looked at that? Are you aware what the conversation is there?
Yeah, we're all aware of it. Mixed use is kind of still trying to determine the specifics of their design. We're actually, we've met with them several times. We'll be continuing to meet with them hopefully at the end of this week, and continuing that conversation. Everybody knows what we've got. Everybody thinks we can make it work. So that's kind of where we are.
One thing I was curious about, and I was asked if the final site plan has to come back before us before final approval. I don't think they have to technically do it because we've already given our board approval, but it would be nice to make sure that the board is able to look that over before it's
Are you talking about for the stadium or mixed use? Or
mixed use stadium, yeah.
Well, all of that, yeah, the plans to bring it all back to you. I mean, I think everything is still in the same areas that were approved. Nothing's moved. The council approved the actual parcels that the mixed use has to work with. But as they develop those designs, we'll be bringing them back And same thing on the stadium. The stadium and how things operate around the stadium is still part of the design thing. They've come up with some very clever ideas about how some of the services like restrooms and others can be shared with fairground functions. Those will all be presented as the details are worked out.
On it maybe.
Thought it was. Is our demolition plan going to change with the announcement of the year delay on the stadium?
Well, it gives us a little room. So, you know, we're going to be able to wait till after the state fair to start demolition. I mean, the plan is to start early October. It's about a 3-month process. That seems to fit very nicely, and gives us a little bit of breathing room. So we're glad to have that. Will help in cost and others, so that's the plan. We've finished a hazardous materials assessment. Just literally, it's going to be finished. Actually, we'll get the report early this week. You know, it's the kind of things you'd normally expect, small amounts of asbestos here and there, that kind of thing, of the buildings, and we've got to have that ready for the demolition process.
So just, again, question on the issue of encroachment. Has there been something presented, a design or?
No, there's not been a design. There's this
We know
concept. And I think the mixed use has been waiting for the stadium. And, you know, as we all know, that other people have been interested in what's going on with the grandstand. So they've kind of slid their design work back. So they've, but as all of these things are beginning to firm up, they're going to be starting their design. I don't have a schedule. They're not planning to start construction until the end of the year at the earliest.
Just to add to what Ron's saying, there are ongoing site coordination meetings that are occurring between all of the different projects here. So there is a pretty fair amount of communication happening so that the edges of the projects will work out and not just work out, but work together and make sense. So there is quite a bit of that coordination going on.
Yeah, and in addition to lots of discussions about what happens during the construction process so that everybody can stay operational.
Okay. Anybody else? Is there anything else for us on that? Okay. Thank you. All right, so the next item here is update on Speedway Motorsports, Inc. Is there any update that we know of?
We did include in the packet, there was an article that came out this morning. I haven't actually had a chance to read through it all yet. You know, that proposal is still being, there's a conceptual rendering that has been circulated through social media. I ran across it yesterday. My understanding is that we're still working towards that coordination of activities. Can this occur? What impact does it have inside and outside the footprint? And so it's still a work in progress.
I have a question. I guess, who on the board has spoken to SMI or James Weaver? Anybody? I'm just trying to understand what information. The hard part I'm having here is what information is out there. I don't know if anybody's talked. I haven't, so I haven't. I'm sort of at an information disadvantage, and I think there's sort of a transparency problem here. It's been 8 months, and we haven't heard any details, you know. And I don't think there's been any real talks with the community. I don't know where SMI is on their community benefits agreement discussions. It's just a little frustrating because we've had these renovations ready to go at the Speedway, and those would have been started last fall, and we'd be done right now and ready to go. Would they be all done right now if we had started them? Or it's just a little frustrating. It keeps going on, and we have no concrete proposal, and there's been no real engagement with the community, and we've got. I'm a lot more interested in seeing the folks, see the Formosas be successful here, and we've got some issues we need to work out, but it's just at some point I wonder when we're going to focus on, the relations we have here, World of Outlaws. I mean, I just wonder, and I'm not really looking for any response. I'm just kind of wondering at what point we focus on what we have while we keep waiting for some proposal that we have very little details on, and very little kind of transparency from SMI on.
I think the initial inquiries came in, we directed them to talk to Tony.
Yeah.
Because he's the promoter with the contract to operate the facility. So we just pointed them that way. But apparently they've also gone to the mayor's office with a plan or trying to open some dialogue. So I think you're right. If we could be included in that and have some open conversation, but there's, I guess, business.
Well, there needs to be community engagement. I mean, we haven't heard one thing about their community benefit agreement and what it's going to look like. And so I just need, at some point, I'm a lot more interested in seeing us go ahead with renovating the track with the funds that are there, and working with the Formosas under their contract, and working, and doing what we're doing. We just can't, we can't keep waiting, forever.
Can we formally invite them to present to us?
Sure.
Because I think that might be a solution. Because right now, I'm finding out stuff on social media. The last that I heard, it was the potential of one weekend race put on by SMI a year, and now we're looking at this. So I would love to hear more directly from them.
Under new business, I put on, looking for some information about this
we can
mixed-use site proximity.
We can talk
And
about
so
that some more then. Yeah, I wanted to sort of ask
but just
questions
saying,
generally. Sure.
hoping that moves up to being on the agenda next month, so we could invite them.
Are we going to talk still at that agenda item some more about this?
Well, we can't vote on it, so I just
No.
wanted to get it on the agenda
No.
so we can get it up, for next
If
month.
I have more comments if we're gonna have more discussion later. So I just, let's talk some more after. Just some general comments, and we really need to start seeing some transparency. There really needs to be more public engagement. It just seems like they're still a far way off, since they haven't really talked about their community benefits agreement at all. And so,
Well, I guess
either
what
we
we-
need to, we need to, we need to start doing what's, start focusing on what we have. And
Well, what we've been waiting for is each month we ask about an update from Tony.
No, I hear you.
We've been waiting for that. That's
it sounds like it's in SMI's court, not Mr. Formosa's per se. So I don't think Mr. Formosa's doing anything wrong there. I think SMI needs to bring a real proposal to the table. And I think that there's a new article with some details, and there's not a lot of clarity there. They just need to, there needs to be something, or there's not something.
Okay, well, I definitely think we can get it on the agenda
Sure.
for next month.
Thanks.
So, is there anything else on that topic, or where we want to talk to Tony? No. Okay. All right. All right. We're going to move on to World of Outlaws, please.
Just really quick, just as an introduction, as you know, that a while back, I think it was October, when we met to present this, present World of Outlaws event for the board's consideration, required an amendment to the Formosa's contract in order to add racing dates. So before you is a copy of the amendment. We've been working through, again, procurement, as this contract was initiated and facilitated through procurement, through RFP, as well as Metro Legal. So essentially what this does is clarifies that in 2018, you also approved an additional race for the Formosas because we added a November All-American race to the schedule, which upped the number of races to 11. That same affirmative vote was taken in October for the World of Outlaws, and so this amendment does add those dates. In addition, it adds the World of Outlaws and World Racing as a signatory on the event, and also specifies certain insurance requirements that are required by Metro, and that we will retain parking revenue, and we'll work directly with the World of Outlaws on any additional rental space outside of the Speedway footprint that they may need to have a successful event. I don't know, Susan, if you have any other thoughts.
Do you have anything to address? Sure.
Thank you, Laura, for that update. But really, from our standpoint, we will be very brief. We don't have a lot of updates to share. Laura shared most of those. As she mentioned, from the insurance standpoint, we have received the approval of our plan from the insurance underwriter. And as I mentioned at the last meeting, we do share the same insurance company, the Fairgrounds Speedway and World of Outlaws. The safety improvements to the track that were approved are ongoing. The World of Outlaws staff has been here and working with the Formosas on timing and scheduling to make sure that the track's been available for us to begin those improvements. So Tom and his staff have been here and working on those improvements, and those are ongoing. And I'll let Tom add anything he would like to add to those improvements or the rest of our operational plan, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And as Jason mentioned, our crew has been here. The insurance company sent out Alan Miller to do an inspection of the property. He gave that approval with the existing fences as they were. We're in the meantime, however, improving them, increasing the height a little bit in certain areas. So all that has been approved by our insuring company. I believe certificates have already been sent to all the parties, to Metro. We've got all that squared away. We are looking forward to a great event and moving forward, and thank you for your approval of the amendment. I assume that's been done, but we are looking forward to a great event. If there's any questions?
You guys have everything you need. Do you need anything else right now?
We need about 10,000 people to come and watch. But yes, we're in a great place right now. We do need to work with fair staff a little bit. We'd like to kind of increase our midway area a little bit and how we bring folks in to create a little more of a festival atmosphere outside of the racetrack. But that's some very simple pieces, and we have everything we need right now. The crew will be back here today. We're doing fence work and guardrail work, but it's very excited about it.
Any other events that weekend that we need to kind of that are going to be a coordination issue for that, or will be all right?
No, we hold simultaneous events often. So the very first weekend is a lighter weekend for World of Outlaws, and that is flea market weekend. And we have done races on flea market weekend numerous times. The event the next weekend, which is May 1st?
31st and June 1st.
Oh, June 1st. There you go.
Please don't make it any quicker.
Yeah. My old brain trying to remember dates. And I think we have wrestling that night, and I think that's it. Scott? Yep, as he's nodding. So we have a wrestling event that night as well. Good to go.
Anybody else?
Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
All right, consideration of fee table.
Oh, since we already did it. Okay, very good.
Consideration of fee table.
Good morning. In the interest of time and the spirit of teamwork, Mary Ann and I are going to present together, if that's all right with you all.
We like it.
All right. In your packet, you'll see our fee table, proposed fee table that Mary and I, along with Felicia and Laura, have put together. We feel like that with this proposed fee table for both the flea market and corporate sales, it would be more structured and streamlined of the payments that would be due to us. Right now, I think Mary Ann has 18 different prices for her vendors for their booths, and I have a number ones as well. So we're excited about this being more streamlined. For us, for me, on the corporate sales side, this will allow us to be able to have the new building will allow us to be able to have a building with minor obstructions, be able to allow us to have like for Christmas Village and events like that, be able to have everyone in one building instead of going to different buildings, having tents and things like that to get through. So events like that and lawn and garden and others that will use the whole building, I'm very excited about it. There are some considerations that we have to work out, but I think we will. But for the most part, our promoters are very excited about getting into the new building. There are some things, the old building, that, of course, that being new, there are some exciting things that are coming up and some new events that have already contacted us to try to come to the fairgrounds. So we're very excited about that. And other things that we're going to have to consider, like smaller events, because our smallest building will be 26,000 square feet. Our smallest building now is what you're in right now, which is Wilson Hall, which is 5,000 square feet. But we're going to work that out, splitting the buildings up and doing things like that, being very negotiable with that as well. So that's all I have to say about that. You got anything to add, Mary Ann?
Well, going down from 18 different fees that we have for the buildings, we've decided that, can you hear me okay? All right, I'm a little shorter than he is. Anyway, we're going to try to move into the new building, going in with the building fees, booths, being $115. And that is for a 10 by 10. For those that are a little bit larger or on a corner, they will be $135. The smaller booths that we have just a very few of will be the 10 by 5s along the wall, and they will be $50. And the majority of the indoor booths are going to increase from a 9 by 10 to a 10 by 10, which the dealers are really excited about too. Outside lot spaces at a 10 by 18 will be $70, and that will include electricity. 75. Okay, I know we've gone from 70 to 75 back and forth, but it will also include electricity, which a lot of the lots do not have now. And the shed spaces, they will be 10 by 10s. They will be $70, and that will include Wi-Fi, electricity, and all concrete floors, which two of our sheds do not have now. So, do you have any questions?
I think what you'll see here is that it is, the fee table that is proposed is, I'd like to explain it as more of a standardization of fees than it is a general fee increase. There are some flea market vendors that will have an increase in booth rental fees, but there will also be many that have flat fees, and some vendors that will be paying less. As you can see in the current pricing, I've included the range of what the vendors are paying now. So for an example right now is that for our prime booths, like Mary Ann explained, corner booths, maybe larger booths, as we standardize from $135, currently vendors are paying upwards of $140. So there's actually a $5 decrease for those vendors. Same goes for the sheds and the lot spaces. Vendors have paid up to $80 and $85 currently, and that is going to be standardized at $75. I will say that we are going to be reevaluating these prices, especially for the outdoor vendors. Those booths are much larger in size. They're almost double in size, but we felt it prudent to keep them flat at the moment at $75 due to the fact that the outdoor vendors are going to be the ones that will have some further relocation as the projects are completed. So there is, as infrastructure continues to be built out, then we will establish, the outdoor permanent spaces. And until that time, because of the inconvenience, we certainly don't want to, increase any prices for that reason, and keeping them consistent with the covered outdoor spaces as well. You also have in your packet some benchmarking. I know that Marianne has done a lot of research with other markets in this region and across the country. And then sales staff and myself, we did a lot of benchmarking with other facilities that have large open space, clear span exposition facilities, and that data is located in the back.
And that exercise showed us that we're pretty comparable to different events across the country. We usually try to do an evaluation of the ones around here, and we always brag about our prices and our price point and our parking and all those things, but going around the country, we're pretty, it compares pretty well to that.
Also, I'd like to say too, so we're once a month. A lot of these big markets around the country, like Stewart's, their shows are like 4 times a year. Their prices may be a little bit higher because they got to make up for not having it 12 months out of the year. So, and also right now we're number 6 in the country for the best flea market. I'm proud of that.
Yeah, that's great. Good job. Yes.
A few questions. When was the last time we did a rate increase for flea markets again?
That was in 2014. We increased.
First of all, thank you and the staff for all the benchmarking data and the work that went into this. I know this was quite a feat, so it shows. And I appreciate the willingness to keep the rates, on par with what they are today. But I just want to make sure we are, comfortable with this, being that we do typically raise rates every 3 to 5 years or so, and the fact that we're vastly improving the facilities for them. The fact that we would, typically probably not do one for a while. So you feel comfortable with that being the case?
Yes, this is a good start. And one thing that we recognized was that it had been some time, a much longer period, since there was an evaluation of fees for our rental facilities. As Marianne indicated, it's been 5 years since we reevaluated fees for the flea market, and it's been a decade at least since we did that for the buildings. There was a maximum fee study that was done in 2011, was not implemented at that time. So it's time. We started modest increases to our fees 2 years ago that we presented here at the board, where we were implementing a modest 2% to help us offset some of our increased expenses like utilities and labor. As those things increased, we hadn't looked to increase our revenue to offset those increases in expenditures. So that has helped over the last 2 years.
Thank you. And then lastly, I know we did the benchmarking data, but have we done any modeling to see if, kind of at capacity or at percentage of capacity, what we would be getting compared today to these rates were standard? So, for example, if we had 50% of the new facility's capacity, what would that mean? 75, 100, so forth.
That's a work in progress. We're definitely going to do that because we want to make sure that we're stay on task for what the budget is. We think that we'll be able to do that with the added events that we'll have because of the new facilities, having AV equipment that we didn't have. We only have AV equipment in this building, but we'll be able to rent those things out. Different things they'll be able to do because of it being a new building will allow us to do that. And I think that once we get down there, I think that we'll be able to do that and have some information on that more.
I'm very interested in that, just being that flea market is 60% of our revenue before these rates are finalized. We need to, I'm glad to help out with that if you need help, but I think we need to make sure we're looking at that so our revenue's on par and we're not putting ourselves in a hole.
Yeah, I did model the revenue impact a little bit earlier. I need to update it with these fees because we've kind of gone back and forth. This has been obviously a long, thoughtful process. So I've got some early numbers. I just need to adjust it with these final numbers that we're presenting to you today. And using some assumptions for capacity and historical data for occupancy from our flea markets. So that is, it's done. It just needs to be adjusted a little bit. We just made an adjustment on some of these numbers, and so I just have to accommodate for that.
Last question is on the fair park, the rental fee for that. I guess I'm curious about process with Metro Parks. If we have a kids, soccer league or something like that, would that be the rate they would have to pay to do that, or would that be something separate?
We are handling all non-sporting events. The Metro Park is handling all sporting events. So this is for concerts and festivals and things like that. So they have a different rate, and I don't even want to know what it is, to be honest. but I definitely have that to you.
No, that's fine. I was just curious because I felt like that would be
To that, and
that's what we want.
And I'm sure they're going to split up each field they're going to program each field and all that. And then I don't want to thank Metro Parks for their help with this as well. We're going to be coordinating a whole lot. Our first event, while you're on that, Caleb, is May the 4th. It's the Big Bounce of America. It's supposed to be big bouncy houses for adults, so we'd like to see you all out there for that. Jason.
Yep, we got plenty of insurance on that.
Yeah.
Laura's going to have to volunteer for that one.
I just want to add one more thing. We're a week and a half away from our second largest flea market, which is April, and we already have over 1,800 booths rented, and we're 1,800 booths and 800 dealers. So we got another week and a half to go, so we'll be full.
All right. Thank you very much. Well done. Okay. We're going to move to new business. And we have a requested appearance of Formosa Productions.
Good morning, everyone. Jim Roberts on behalf of Formosa Productions, LLC.
Mr. Roberts, 1 second. Well, before we start, I kind of would like to hear from the executive. I think Laura should kind of speak first and kind of give us a rundown of what we're doing here, and then we can hear from these folks.
I agree.
Sure thing. I can be very quick. So we had sent on April 8th a letter to Formosa Productions just to inform them that we were exercising one of the clauses in the contract regarding breach on two items specifically that needed resolve. One was a curfew violation for a track rental. According to the contract, the track rental was supposed to end at 7 p.m. on a school night, and it was scheduled till 9. The second is an unpaid concessions commission from last race season. We've been working with them for many months now to try to get that resolved, and through the end of the year planning and budgeting for the current year, obviously we need some assurance for revenue that was to come in, and so that was part of that. One of the reasons for looking to see if that revenue was going to come in so that we could book that as we work with OMB as we plan for the year-end financials. Third issue was resolved, and that was just late office rent payments for January, February, and March, and an encouragement to continue on-time payments into this racing season. April marks the first month of lease payments, and that is consistent with last year too, having a March to April lease payment schedule.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Jim Roberts. I'm an attorney. I represent Formosa Productions. I appreciate the opportunity to hopefully address all the issues raised in this letter dated April 8th, 2019. Let me apologize in advance. I'm a little stopped up today, so if I have trouble hearing you, I apologize. This letter that was hand-delivered on April 8th seems to suggest that the Formosa Productions is in breach of the contract, and I'd like to address that first. That's a pretty serious allegation. I don't believe that that is well-founded. Part of the problem is, if I reviewed the contract, I specifically addressed the concessions issue because I realize that's been in the first issue raised in the letter. I'm not certain that the board is aware, but actually the contract that was signed does not state when those payments would be made. There's nothing in the contract that I could find, especially referring to section 4.5, which talks about the payment of concessions, doesn't actually say when they're due. So I would submit that it is impossible to be in breach of a contract when there are no payment schedules to find. As this contract is from March 23rd, 2018 to March 23rd, 2023, arguably payments aren't due until that final date. Now, that's not how things are normally done, but let's just be honest, that's what the contract as drafted says. My understanding is that there has been some confusions about the concessions or the commissions on the concessions is because the folks at Formosa Productions did not realize that that had been incorporated into the contract. I know there's been some discussions, but as far as they knew, they were not required to even pay those, partly because they've never received an invoice. There's been no invoicing, and I think the board needs to be aware of that, no invoicing of any of these concessions since, well, until last week. And so to suggest that they're in breach of the contract because they didn't pay an invoice that hadn't been submitted, I think that should be taken into consideration. Not mentioned by Ms. Womack was basically when they received this letter on April 8th, they did two things. They received a phone call from the Tennessean newspaper, who apparently had gotten the same letter, and they also contacted Scott Wallace asking him to provide invoices. Those invoices were provided the next day on April 9th by email, which was appreciated, and the problem is that those invoices don't total the amount that is in the letter. And so now, as of April 9th, we've got a problem. We don't know how much is owed. And so I would ask the board to look into that to see if they can reconcile the differences. The letter claims that $31,930.45 is owed, and yet the invoices provided, or I should say finally provided by Mr. Wallace, only add up to $28,430.34. So I would submit that that Formosa Productions certainly has not intentionally breached this contract in any way, but certainly legally has not, because they haven't been asked to pay. And when they were asked to pay, they were given inconsistent information. We would ask that that be reconciled, that some step be taken either by Ms. Womack or the Fair Board itself to determine what is actually owed. And since there hasn't been a request made for coming on 10 months now, that some consideration be given to allow them to pay this amount, which assuming they owe it, having to pay it all in one lump sum might be a bit of a burden, that there be some consideration given and perhaps stretched out. But in any event, I do not believe that they were in breach of this contract in any form. I'm not suggesting they should wait till March of 2023 to pay these amounts, but certainly the contract would allow that. I don't think that's a good way to do business, but that's what the contract says. As to the violation of crack rental, or crack curfew, excuse me, there is a reference in the letter to an event that occurred on May 10th, 2018. And my apologies, I've spoken with Mr. Tony Formosa and Ms. Claire Formosa, and no one seems to have any idea what that event was. I would respectfully request that there be some sort of second letter provided or some sort of indication of what exactly happened 10 months ago that allegedly violated the contract, and so that we could deal with it. Still know what it's referencing. As to the events of March 27th, 2019, I think the board needs to be aware of a little bit of the backstory there. As the board is aware, the All-American 400 was rained out in November and rescheduled for this year. It is my understanding that in the process, they had an opportunity to bring Kyle Busch in, and I'm not, it's probably as big a NASCAR fan as I should be, but that Mr. Busch, I do know, is a very famous and well-known and popular driver, and who would drive revenues and drive attendance to All-American even more than it would normally. And I believe even Mr. Formosa himself was quoted in the Tennessean saying it might even sell out the event to have him participate. My understanding is that Mr. Busch wanted to come and do some test driving ahead of time, and that there was interaction with the director over that issue. Mr. Busch apparently required a longer testing period, and there were some issues about scheduling. Claire Formosa spoke with Ms. Womack, and apparently some sort of arrangement, or at least they thought they had an arrangement, that if they went out to the community and got the approval of the principal at the school across the street and the neighborhood association, that there would be no objection or any problem with a later track running time. That was done. There's a letter from the principal, there is a neighborhood association signed off on it, and they simply thought that there had been an approval of this. There may have been a misunderstanding, I'll concede that. I don't see how that is a breach of the contract, much less a material breach, but I would also submit to the board that the way this contract is written as it relates to the timing of events specifically allows for modification. And I would submit that the going to the neighborhood, going to the school principal, all of those steps were taken at the direction of the executive director, show pretty much good faith and reliance on that. If there was a miscommunication, then we'll make sure that the next time that we need accommodation to bring in a nationally known racer, we'll make sure we get everything a little bit more nailed down. I don't believe there was any intention to violate the contract, and I believe they acted in good faith at all times. The last issue that was raised in the letter had to do with rent. Once again, that is covered in section, I think it's 4.4. I could be mistaken on that. It does indicate that rent is due, but however, it does not indicate when that rent is owed, when it is to be paid, or when it's late, or anything. It just says that it's owed. In fact, the only payment required by Formosa Productions in this contract that has any sort of schedule is the track rental itself, which has to be paid in installments from April through November. Much like the concessions, arguably, this office rent is due whenever they want to pay it, and could obviously or arguably be due on March 23rd, 2023 at the time the contract terminates. Again, I don't suggest that that's a good business practice, but that's what I read from the contract. And if that's what we're talking about breaching, then we need to address the contract because it is what it says. The letter that was sent to Formosa Productions seems to insinuate that payments have been late and that they need to be made on time. But since the contract doesn't tell us that, I think that is something that needs to be addressed in I would suggest it on an informal meeting between Formosa Productions and the Fair Board, but it doesn't say. And so I would submit, since the contract doesn't define a date that it's due, that it would be impossible to be not on time or late or a breach of the contract itself. That I think addresses almost everything in the letter. I would submit that one of the reasons that the office rent was paid and is not an issue today is because on April 4th, 2019, invoices for that office rent were delivered to Ms. Claire Formosa, and the check was cut the same day. And so certainly Formosa Productions has shown good faith in paying invoices when they were submitted, whether or not they were due on that date or not. They've certainly taken steps to be current, and it is my understanding as well that at least Ms. Womack has been aware that they can only cut checks if they're presented invoices, and I don't believe that waiting to receive an invoice is any sort of breach under this agreement. Going forward, there is a reference in this letter to the fact that some issues of this contract need to be addressed, and I think that's absolutely true. What we would like to do is resolve this letter today and submit a written proposal to the Fair Board of some changes that we think to be made in order for the Speedway to coexist with, the MLS soccer stadium to coexist with the Speedway in a way that's not going to be a detrimental to the Speedway and not be a breach by Metro of this contract. But that's all to be done in a letter to be submitted later. That is my understanding of the issues as raised. Are there any other particular questions that I can address?
Mr. Roberts, who in your words, signed off from what neighborhood association? What neighborhood association and who signed off?
So back in March, there was a monthly neighborhood meeting that we have that I believe Scott Wallace, Heidi, Laura, and a few others, I believe Dad, I was not present, addressed the question of if the track rental could start early, run late. To my understanding from Laura was that Heidi said she was fine with it as long as the school signed off on it. So I took the proper steps and went to the school and met with the principal, told him the situation. We had a really nice long conversation. They sent me an email to that effect the same day. I sent that email to Heidi and Laura.
So this is the NEAC, the committee meeting you're talking about. Okay.
Yeah.
So a couple questions about NEAC, Ms. Formosa. I saw that email chain in advance of March 27th and expressed to before the rental that the approval of the principal was not a contractual provision. And is it correct that Laura informed you in advance of that track rental that you still only had the 4 hours?
So to answer your question, yes. After I sent the email to Heidi and Laura, it was my understanding that I believe you received it. There was a phone call made, I believe, with you and Laura that said, we can't do this, if I'm not mistaken. She let me know, and I told her, okay. So I called them and said, hey, we can't start at 12. We have to start at 3. In the past, we have done 3 to 9, and there's never been any issues raised. It is in the contract that we have to go to 3 to 7, so it was a complete miscommunication between myself and my office staff. However, in the way it's addressed in this letter is that we just did it with no consideration to the neighborhood association whatsoever, and that there's been several, other times that we have broken the contract and the times, and I guess our thing is we just want to come to you and say, look, we did what we were told by the executive director as well as the neighborhood association meeting, and took the proper steps to see that we could start late or start early or go late.
So I guess the concern here is that, a few other points is, there were some communications after 7 o'clock on the 27th in real time. And I believe you communicated with Ms. Baskell from NEAC around 7:45 when you asked if people were complaining.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in real time there were expressions, even though in your words you think there were some miscommunications on the front end, but in real time there were communications happening saying, no, this is after 7. And then it kept going till like 8:45.
I absolutely agree with you. So
know?
I was not on site, and I believe Dad was, and his phone had actually died. Laura tried contacting him. I drove back to the Speedway and got here around 8:10, 8:15, and I said it has to stop. And I believe it actually stopped at like 8:17. So
I think that the track rentals seem to be the issue that come up a lot because it's sort of a what I hear from people in the area in the neighborhood is that they don't feel like they can count on that 7 o'clock curfew a lot because there's a lot of slippage here and there. And I know I've sent emails to Laura over the past year on a few occasions saying, hey, it's 7:45, it's 8 o'clock. And I think that people in the community are just don't with a race on a weekend, a lot of times they know what they can count on. They know when it's going to be. They know when the race is in advance. Track rentals, the communication about when those are happening has kind of slipped, and also there's not there's no penalties if you violate it, and but it also shouldn't be on the community and the staff to kind of police it. We should be able to count on that it's going to be able to stop, And I think we had some good conversations when we had those negotiations about what was going on here. It was a nod to not just the school, but like all families who live in the neighborhoods, I think, count on on school nights track renewals. And I think they're pretty generous. I mean, there's no penalties for violating them. And my understanding is they're a little later than at sometimes in recent years. There were times when it was 6 o'clock at 6:30. I've been told in the past, and I've been told that compliance was good with that. And so, I mean, I think these are more generous, and they need to be complied with,
I absolutely agree with you. To my knowledge, we've never had a curfew of 6 o'clock. We have these monthly neighborhood meetings for this very reason. And I can tell you that other than the one that I was not present for in March, that I've never heard an issue be raised by either one of the neighborhood association members that come. To my knowledge, I would absolutely love to know at what point we have violated a track rental curfew past 7 o'clock, and there were issues raised, because this is certainly the first time I'm hearing about them. I'm obviously aware of the issue that happened on March the 27th, which is why I'm here today. But I would personally like to know at what point, if we violated that term prior to March the 27th, when it happened, and I would love to address it with my staff. I can't say that I'm at every single track rental, so I can't sit here and vouch 100%, but I do know that I'm a part of all of the neighborhood committee meetings, and I've never heard an issue come up. Heidi is who we've dealt with for years, and we feel as though she was who was appointed by the neighborhood committee to speak for them. So I feel as though if there's issues with the neighborhood association in any event that we have, not just track rental, that it would be up to her to communicate those issues with us. And we actually sit and talk at every meeting, and is everything okay? Are you guys okay? Are there any issues? Is there anything we can do? No, everything's fine. We're doing great. There was an issue raised with the drifting event, as everybody knows, a year or so ago. But other than that, if there's ever been a time that we have violated the track rental curfew, I would love to know. If someone could send me that in a written email, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think the point is just having some communication. I don't think
Absolutely.
anybody, want to keep this on a positive track.
Absolutely, and that's why we're here today,
Yeah.
to just basically talk to you guys and let you guys know, hey, like, we didn't just go out and do this intentionally. We asked for permission, and I understand that there were some communication issues towards the end of this. Like I said, I'll take full responsibility on the 27th and say that it was a communication issue between myself and my staff. But as far as anything that's happened prior to that, it's been stated several times that it's a continuous thing. I would just like to know when that is so I can address those issues myself.
Yeah, so I think our council has said that she'll put together some points to address what you've brought up today. There might be miscommunication in the agreement. We want to just close those loops.
I would like to have that too. I mean, that
Yeah,
was one of the things that I discussed with Ms. Formosa. It was when asking her about this reference to May 10th, 2018 event. Obviously, I wanted to know if there'd been any other issues, because obviously that would be relevant to a discussion about a particular event. I would ask that a list so that we could address them. And it's very hard to, we're here today to address one's particular.
No, I think we're more
day,
concerned
so-
about here's the time and where are we going moving forward, not going back and looking at everything that may have happened.
Ed?
So,
Right.
yeah.
I do have one question. So I want to bring Laura in a little bit on some of the communication stuff, because I think it's only fair. On financials, just Laura, what is the ongoing communication like on the concession payments? Have you had communications in the past in discussions with FGS about the need to make concession payments? What's the conversations like? I mean, are they aware? Putting aside for a moment the potential need for us to sit down and have discussions about some parts of the contract, but are they? Tell us about the dialogue.
Last fall, it was noted on our financials that we did not have any money in the concession pass-through account. So I thought it was an accounting issue. As you know, we had a transition of financial administrators from April of 2018 till when Felicia started. So I figured that it had just been coded incorrectly and put in our general concession revenue, which comes from our contract with D&D. At that point in fall, I believe it was November-ish, tracking back, we realized that we had not received any commission payments, which was, the term was in our last contract with the Formosa, so it wasn't a term that changed. I will say that, you know, we had numerous drafts, as you know, because you were part of that process with the contract. There were numerous drafts, and there are terms in there that were either omitted or needed to be edited as we proceeded toward, you know, finalizing that contract. And one of them was concessions. We had extensive discussions with Claire about changing concessions a little bit so that they had a little bit more freedom in who they wanted to contract with. If an event came on the Speedway, then they wanted the ability to be able to go out and secure a concessionaire, and we were, you know, comfortable with that. At the same time, that development of that term, which took a while from late February into early March, mind you, their first race was the end of March that last year. Through those discussions, it was talked about that, you know, there would be no change to the commission structure. We weren't looking for any additional funding that wasn't in place for the previous 5-year contract. So it was a term that remained the same. Since then, we've worked together. Claire and I have had always a very open dialogue and just tried to work through it. I know that there was some confusion on their part regarding the term. You know, I hadn't heard anything that there was a notice that that term was incorrect up until the point I asked for the payments. We had submitted invoices and a report that D&D had generated off their point of sale to Lauren, who handled their payments and invoices again last fall. So to your point, April was a resend. It wasn't the first send of invoices, so I know that that employee is no longer with them, so I'm not sure. There may have been some issues with paperwork at that point when Lauren left, but she was given all the invoices and the full report by D&D broken down by race of what the total revenue for concessions was, and then the 15% commission that we were due.
I think, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, and to one other point that hasn't been raised, I know that my understanding is Mr. Formosa has mentioned sort of portions of the contract at times, and I don't know if that still is, there are still concerns about that, but it sounds like maybe we all need to talk to make sure, you know, contract is optimal for everybody. It's structured in a way that allows FGS to thrive and do well. Have some more conversations, and it sounds like Mr. Roberts is saying you all want to.
And the letter
you're
does
happy to
invite
do
us to do that, and I think we were just trying to take care of this today before we sat down to do that.
Sounds like a great idea.
Yes.
And we've taken notes with regard to your response to the letter that was sent out, and so anything that the legal department can do to assist and facilitate those conversations, we're willing to do that.
Yeah, and it's very annoying that somebody sent this to the Tennessean. I don't know. I was going to ask you about that, but you've already brought it up as well. So I don't think that should have happened. I don't know how that happened, and nobody's trying to embarrass anybody. I mean, we're just, Claire, when I read this, I don't read any real tone in here, except at the end where it's positive and let's work this out. They're just facts that have to be addressed, and some of it's communication. So let's get it worked out and ironed out and move forward.
I think we should do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Update on contract negotiations with the Tennessee State Fair Association for the 2019 Tennessee State Fair.
Just a general update. Our conversations with Scott and Kate and Julie from TSFA have been fantastic. I want to thank them for their diligence and time that they have taken to start the contract talks for hosting the 2019 State Fair. Also to Commissioner Bergeron for his assistance, and of course Susan, thank you for your time. What you have in front of you is a draft proposed term sheet. There are still a few things that need to be worked out as we present these to our respective boards. You are first. The TSFA board is meeting on the 24th, so there are some provisions yet that Scott needs to present to his board and have their support and their affirmation on. So as you can see, we are going to do a one-year contract under the circumstances with the potential for them to possibly relocate in 2020. It was prudent to do a one-year contract. Certainly if they want to continue with us after that date, we are certainly happy to have a longer term. The premises itself, as we talked earlier and we talked last month, because of the relaxation of the timeline for demolition and construction, State Fair will have access to all of the buildings as they currently stand up on the hills, so there really won't be significant change to the site plan that they currently work with. Exclusions to that include the expo facilities themselves. They have elected to not use those. However, we certainly will make parking adjacent to the expos available to the State Fair. Compensation, this is one of the terms that Scott's going to be presenting to his board next week for consideration. And in speaking with them, in past years, we have done a $50,000 payment up front, and then there's been a compensation system based on ticket sales. There were several different price structures that were set up in the contract based on the type of ticket, whether they were full price, promotional price, free, etc. And we work with Scott and his team every year to audit those, and so everybody's on the same page. What we have proposed this year for trying to keep us as whole as possible and to assist the TSFA in their budget, which is very, very tight as well, like ours. We have proposed a flat cash payment of $60,000 up front and then another $25,000 after the event. Again, that term will be discussed on theirs next week. We've also decided to split parking revenue, and that would also be for parking staff as well. So we have agreed that we will utilize our staff and we will park and keep the revenue from the Fair Park portion, and then Scott and his team will concentrate on the remaining parking lots, and they will keep that revenue. Helps us both earn more revenue and then certainly offset some expenditures by having to staff the entire site to bring parking in. We did talk about use of off-site parking, which TSFA during those peak days, so that would be the first Saturday and Sunday, and then potentially the second Friday evening, and then Saturday and Sunday. To supplement parking, we've already reached out to the Metro School board over on Bransford Avenue, and they have given us a verbal okay to utilize their lots, which will add 600 parking spaces to our total. And we've also have clearance from our insurance manager over at Metro Legal to utilize our shuttles or different shuttles if that's how we decide that we're going to help get patrons from that lot over to the fairgrounds during those peak times. We extended the move-out date, so more often than not, the flea market moves in the very next week, so we only have, it takes a week and a half to set up the fair, almost 2 weeks to set up the fair, but unfortunately Scott and his crew and our crew only have 3 days to turn it over. before the flea market moves in. This year, the calendar has worked out such that we have a whole additional week, which gives everybody a sigh of relief. But again, because we are going to be preparing the property for demolition immediately following the fair, we thought that we could relax that a little bit, give a little bit more time. Needless to say, there will be animal waste cleanup that has to happen prior to demolition, but the cleanup will be relaxed a little bit because, you know, we're demolishing the building, so if we don't quite get everything spit shine before demo, that's not a problem. So we did extend that, and then the only outstanding item is that we have met with Tony and Claire. They had scheduled a race on September 7th, and so in order to assist State Fair, who's, you know, traditionally had those 2 weeks for a very long time, they usually do the monster truck event, which is extremely successful for them. It brings in a lot of revenue to the fair. It's a very important part of their budget, and so there was a conflict there. So we have proposed in our last meeting that in order to support the fair and keep the race on the schedule, could it potentially be rescheduled to Friday, September 13th? It puts a little bit of extra burden on Scott and our crew to help get the track cleaned appropriately between monster trucks, since they do bring dirt on the track, get it cleaned adequately for that race. But we're just waiting for, you know, a final confirmation that that plan will work and be a good compromise for everyone.
Well said.
Okay. Very
Doing
good.
Anything else, Scott? I mean,
no, I mean, I'm excited to get to work on this year's fair and try to put the best state fair on that we can possibly here at the site. And we'll be presenting this to our board as a whole next week, and we're excited. I think it's something that personally, I think it's something that's fair for both sides, and I appreciate the time that Susan and Laura and Jason took to meet with us, and I appreciate that very much.
Thanks to you guys.
is there any other use of new facilities in the plan for this year's fair?
For us, it's kind of hard to incorporate it because it's kind of outside the footprint. We discussed it a little bit because we'll be bringing cars in Wedgwood. So when we're bringing the cars in, you know, to secure that area, however that may look with temporary fencing to have whatever we could put in there. And, you know, if it was a 9,000 seat indoor arena, you know, we could have say a tractor pool or something inside. Well, you know, of course that justifies, but with what we have to do on top of the hill, I mean, we could utilize a few of the areas down there, but it just wouldn't be cost prohibitive to be able to secure that and have people crossing basically an entrance.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talked at length about having the show arena, the new show arena, be available for the fair, but just logistically, for Scott and his volunteers, it'd be kind of tough at this point if they're having to relocate off the hills. So the offer was made. It'd be better for them to continue with the existing footprint.
Sure.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, that's better than going to the dentist. I like that. Thank
you. All right. What's next? All right, so we've touched on this. I wanted this on the agenda so that we can bring it up again next month. The mixed-use development site plan, proximity to the Speedway. I don't know that there's anything else to discuss about that, but
like I said, I don't know what we're discussing. I mean, we've
Yeah,
got it's a little frustrating that a picture leaked out through a marketing company related to SMI that may be, and it's just, I think it's hard because a lot of the parts of it, I mean, there's buildings that are sitting in the middle of Wedgwood Avenue, there's bleachers on top of Fair Park, there's a video board that might be in the floodway. I don't know, you know, it's hard when we don't have anything concrete when in contrast, we have, you know, a approved plan that's gone through planning and flood water, and stormwater and all these places, and we have expo buildings that are well underway. So it's just hard to talk against sort of something that's not really there, you know?
Well, we got it on this month, so we can move it up the ladder to next month and see if there's more information that we can bring forward. Yes, Mr. Barron? That was addressed by Metro Council. You're welcome. We can meet with you afterwards.
I think that's not in order right now.
It's already been through Metro Council. I mean, I don't understand why you're bringing this up at this point. Yeah. All right. You're out of order, and we will be happy to talk to you after the meeting, but thank you. Mr. Barron? Okay, slate of board commissioners, Board of Commissioners, officers in June. Like we already just did that. Like
It feels like it hasn't been a
I feel
year.
like we just did that.
3
Like,
months.
what's the?
The idea typically is for the board to identify the slate of officers in the months preceding, so that
Right.
when that time comes, that you can vote on that slate. So that's why that item
Okay.
is on today, so that persons that have interest in serving the board in as an officer can express that interest, and the board can consider that and try to develop a slate for further action at another meeting.
Didn't we just do that? Yeah, we just did it. Maybe we didn't have the vote, but I think we identified it anyway.
Okay.
But it does cycles up every year. That's a change we made a few years ago.
So if no changes to
Yeah.
what you already discussed, then
Right.
we can just put it on the next agenda and see if
Okay.
there's any further discussion, and then vote at the appropriate time.
Okay. Councilman, anything? Okay. All right. Anybody have a motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And just a quick reminder that we are doing the ribbon cutting for Fair Park in 15 minutes. If you can join us down by the dog park at the corner of Craighead and Bransford.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information about this and other programs, visit nashville.net.